to fuck me up on that. And she's like,
All right, good.
I'll sit you on this side.
All right, we'll go there.
I figured it'd be normal for us to put each other in front of our
Oh,
faces.
that would be good.
It might confuse people
Yeah.
with the lack of hair and the actual hair. So as we get started this evening, did everybody drink? Take some shots? All right, my jokes are already laughing. Y'all are already hammered. I love it. So obviously I'm going to make bad jokes all night long. If y'all don't know me, my name's Zack A Knight. I'm the founder of ATLVets, Advanced Online for Veterans. And we're the ones hosting this evening. So I appreciate everybody being here. And I want to make sure I give a shout out before she goes too far. Britt, wave your hand. So Britt, no, she's very loud and yells across everybody. I want to say thank you to Britt and the Buckhead Club for hosting us. She is the director of member relations, cruise director. I'm still waiting on the tiki, margaritas. But because of Britt and everything she does, she's the reason we're here this evening. So can we give her a round of applause, please? If y'all have anything y'all would like to know more about, anybody new to the Buckhead Club, first time? Beautiful. So she's the one to hunt down and talk to. If you want to learn more about what we're doing at the Buckhead Club, I'm on the membership committee. I also run the veteran club within the club, hence why we're here this evening. We have several amazing members that are here already. If you want to know more about the Buckhead Club, talk to her, smile and wave. She'll sell you on a Braves game in June. Never mind, she will not sell you on the Braves game in June. It's because the members already got it up. So, but talk to her, doing amazing things here at the Buckhead Club, and we couldn't be doing all of this without her, of course. So thank you for that. Before we get started with Mr. Carr this evening, I'm going to click over. Let's see if it actually works today. Heck yeah. All right. So one thing that I've been told by a couple mentors, you don't have to go anywhere.
I was just gonna move out of the way.
So a couple things I've been told by a mentor too is to make sure every time we have one of these events, I update what's going on with ATLVets and everything we're working on. So Vet Ops is a new program we're running for professional development. You do not have to be a veteran to attend this. Who's not a veteran in the room? Perfect. Who's Army in the room? Whoa. Absolutely. Is there anybody else? I don't care. So only Army. Only Army. I'm so serious. And there's a retired multi-star admiral in the room, and I still said that. Go Army, beat Navy. Sorry, sir. I had to throw it out there. So Vet Ops, if you want to learn more about Vet Ops, this QR code, we just relaunched it this month, actually. It's a program I ran here at the Buckhead Club for about 3 years, focused on entrepreneurship. Vet Ops stands for Veterans Optimizing Professional Success. The beauty of this is kind of what the conversation tonight's going to be, a veteran and a non-veteran talking business and professional development. Vet Ops is all about that. We host it at the History Center. It's a great collaboration over there where they're trying to bring more veterans into Atlanta History Center. I also happen to be the head of security there. So if y'all ever want to sneak on property, let me know ahead of time because I will make sure you get away scot-free. But this program starts with a first Monday of every month. We're doing a workshop at the History Center. We had our first one as the rebrand in Vet Ops this month, and we had about 25 folks show up. So I was really excited about that. And it was a great conversation around professional development for essentially young executives. So I'm stoked about it. I say young executives, whereas a lot of veterans that are 20, 25-year vets transition and they have no clue what they want to do after that. So it's really focused on how can we help veterans promote themselves and essentially take that next step in the executive ladder. So if you want to know more, scan that. I'll circle back to that towards the end. And then we're back to Mr. Cannon Carr. So this evening, just for a little bit of context, I'm going to give an intro. You can have a seat back down so we can make it nice and comfy.
Yeah.
I want to give a good intro. I say good intro. This is probably going to be a hack job compared to what his actual experience is. So Cannon has a podcast. I'm going to start with that because as a mutual podcaster, I love having a high-end executive that has a podcast. That means this conversation is actually going to be articulate, thanks to him, because y'all know I can't really articulate anything. So Cannon is a wealth management strategist, CEO, business owner, Corner Cap Wealth Advisors, You started as the CIO,
Mhm.
and now you're still the CIO, also the CEO. You have a podcast that is called Business Owner Tales from the Trenches.
Yep.
And you talk about some really interesting entrepreneurial journeys, conversations from other entrepreneurs. Who all is a business owner in here? Some entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So that's my core. I love that
Yeah.
piece, right? And I know that's a great conversation we're gonna have. As a business owner myself, foundation founder, we'll go with that. It's one of those that at my core, I really love helping veterans start businesses. So this is a great conversation because I'm not a money guy. I'm not a financial guy. Numbers kind of, y'all ever see like Rain Man and they start dancing around in the air? That's for me, but I can't actually draw them back in. So this is a great conversation because one of our pillars with ATLVets is money management. So I'm excited to have this conversation from that perspective. And let's go down the list. So you've been doing Corner Cap Wealth Advisors for 17 years or so.
Yeah.
You were a senior equity analyst. You've done this, that, and the other. Went to Columbia, some small school, maybe Princeton as well.
Yep.
So kind of educated,
Sometimes.
slightly educated. But it's kind of an interesting piece that our paths crossed in a very interesting way. PJ Bain introduced us at an Emory event, and it seemed like you knew everybody all the time. I bring up, hey, this guy, Carr, is coming to the Buckhead Club. And like, oh yeah, I know Cannon. Like, okay, so you know everybody knows you, which is like the fastest way to fame is fortune, or fastest way to fortune's fame. So everybody knows you, which means you're very fortunate and have all the things.
Keep going.
I'm trying to hype them up, y'all. I'm trying to
I
hype
like
them
that.
up.
Okay.
Beyond that very short bio,
Yeah.
tell us a fun fact, something that we wouldn't know from your LinkedIn, your bio. Tell us something about yourself.
Well, I mean, on the professional side, I'm a business owner, but and I coach business owners, work with business owners, developing their wealth. But my journey into business owner was such a backwards way, right? And LinkedIn will tell you this. I was an analyst on Wall Street, and we can talk a little bit about that. And boy, and I loved it, right? I mean, I get to be on CNBC. You're kind of a rock star. But at the end of the day, you're up in the booth commentating, and you're not really making investment decisions for families and people. So I wanted to do that, and I wanted to do that by being part of a business owner group in the wealth management business. And so, for the first decade, I had fun being a business owner because market was going up, everything was going great. Market necessarily wasn't going up.
What years?
So I started in 2007 as a business owner through even till now. But where we'll get to is when things break down in your business, that's when you learn, and I call it getting punched in the mouth. That's when you learn what it's like to be a business owner. And there, you really, you have to make tough decisions. We'll talk about that, but it makes me a better advisor for business owners, right? So, in LinkedIn, everything looks great, but the reality is it's not always great, right? And business ownership is a journey, and there's always something. If you look over a 10-year period, and I explore this in the podcast, if you look over a 10-year period, there's always something disruptive that you cannot predict that's going to potentially knock you off path. And so what I've always loved through my career is if you can't predict the future, how can you still line things up to give you the better odds of success? And that's basically everything I do.
And that's the reason I wanted to highlight the years, because 08 was 09, pretty bad turn in certain markets. And of course, COVID. And we've had for the last 15 or 20 years, we have ups and downs, but you've kind of been in this space through all of that.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that stability has looked like for you? In 20 years in your field is very different than 20 years in the military.
Yeah.
How has that been stable for you in such a up and down volatile every 5 years? It seems that flow is happening.
Yeah. So our business is tied to two things. One, the markets, which you can't control. And then two, your ability to serve clients and solve problems, right? And make them stay or make new clients come to you. So, we'll call that organic growth, but then the market itself creates a lot of noise. And so the market adds so much unpredictability to our business that you have to be able to manage through that. So I wouldn't call it stable at all, but the toughest times aren't when the market goes down. It's when your team breaks down, right? And that's really what you learn to navigate. So if you build your business right, if you're tied to some kind of market, right? Now, some of you might be tied to the housing market, right? Or and volumes come, if you're in mortgage processing, right? And your volumes come from the housing market. For us, it comes from the public markets like stocks and bonds. You can't control that. So, when it goes down 20%, it hurts, but we're kind of used to it, right? And our job is to coach clients not to freak out, and sometimes coach ourselves not to freak out. But you don't have to freak out, right? You can build a plan that navigates that kind of volatility. But what gets not, so I wouldn't call it stable at all, right? We've been through, 2008. You remember who was in business in 2008? Do you remember, it felt like the wheels more than coming off, right? And, you're unprofitable for a while. And then, COVID hits. That was a whole new story, right? And so those things happen. But, what you learn is to build a team, build processes underneath that can help you really grow a business. And that's really what is the secret to stability. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but we kind of jump off of that.
It does, but I want to put more context around it.
All right.
And I think it's something fascinating. In the military, I had 150 guys under my control, if you will. I know there have been people military-wise, CEO-wise, that have had more or less, and there's kind of a balance there. A lot of entrepreneurs who has more than 10 employees in their business right now. So that's the context I want to put around this, because what I love about this conversation is there's almost a gap where sometimes it's easy to have a conversation with people with 10 or less employees, but then have somebody of your caliber. So I want to put context around Corner Cap. Can you share with us, if you're willing?
Yeah, sure.
Employees, revenue, where are you at with the company? How big is it? What is it mid-market? What does it look like as a company? So everybody understands the perspective you have on this conversation.
Yeah, sure. So we have 23 employees, including a couple contractors. And we've got about 8 million in revenue. And we've been around for 35 years. And what's interesting is, our two founders, which we'll get to know them in a little bit, because they ended up having a fight. That's where you learn your business needs to hold up when they split. But those guys are very good at working in the business. They weren't looking to grow fast. So we've never been a high growth business, but we have been a very stable business. And one of the things I'm taking on is, how do we kind of grow a little bit stronger? Because that is something our team has the capability to do.
So looking at it from that 7-8 figure realm, right? It's a different conversation when you're dealing with that much. And if you think per employee, that's a lot of revenue per employee, and a lot that's responsible across. As you're building a team, because that's where you started, is if your team's resilient, if you have certain things in place, especially when bad breakups happen, especially on the partnership level, right? That's a divorce gone wrong terribly. Tell us a little bit about, how do you build a team? How do you recruit for a team? What's it look like? In the military, we're kind of, here you go, and you make it that pile of gold if you can. You have a little bit more flexibility with that. Can you tell us just what do you look for to build that resilience?
So if you're the leader of your company, I used to hear people say, like I'm in a group of CEOs and we kind of coach each other, and they'll say the CEO is the chief culture officer. And I'm like, that sounds kind of weak, right? Culture, what does that really get for you? But as you do get bigger, it's dawned on me that's so deep and so important. Because culture is your values. It's how you make decisions, right? And you want to invest a lot in culture. In a minute, we can get to one of the podcasts hosted with just one of the founders of Atlanta's largest PR firm. And his whole theme is values and culture matter. So as I grew into the CEO role, I'm realizing, right, once you get big enough, and it's not just about yourself, it is about the culture. And culture means, values, and it also means, how people make decisions. And
so I was about to challenge that piece.
Okay,
right. Please. So not to interrupt the flow.
We'll get to how do you build a team, but okay.
But how you build a team, but you're saying culture. Put tangibility around that. Because I feel like culture is a very hot button topic. Everybody says you have to build culture. But what does that actually mean?
Culture means you set the values about how your company or your business makes decisions. And the reason that's important is if you are going to build a team of people who are going to be making decisions, and they're not going to be checking with you every time, because every time, if everything has to go through you as you get bigger, you're not going to grow. You're not going to scale. You've got to build things that are independent of you, which is a key theme I work on in the podcast. How do you build a business that's independent of you? You know, if you founded your own business and you have the craft, up to that first $1 million in revenue, it's all about you, and that's fine. You can hire an assistant, you can hire an operations person, you hire a marketing assistant. But as you get to 5 million in revenue, it's harder to be about you because you can't make enough decisions at 5 million in revenue. Now, if you're going to get to 10 million in revenue, you definitely can't, right? So culture then means the values about how people in your firm make a decision. And so you want to hire people on those values. And it sounds, you know, and you're right, it is a little bit of a buzzword, and yet it's so important. Because if people are making the right decisions without always checking with you, your firm's going to grow, your firm's going to be more profitable, your firm's going to be focused, and that is magic. That is how you get from 5 million to 10 million.
But if they make the wrong decision,
right,
it's the same. It's almost like the extremes.
Yeah.
Right. And this is where I like the team building and culture in the same conversation.
Yeah.
If you find a team and you do the wrong team member, and make the bad decision, that 1 million goes to 100,000 very quickly.
You can go overnight, right? Yeah.
So keep diving into the conversation.
Yeah. So you want to build people you can trust to make the right decisions, right? And so how do you find those people? And you know, just doing an interview according to a resume is not going to necessarily tell you those people. Yeah. You've got to work a lot harder than that. And I actually have a lot of fun with interviews. Maybe we don't get into it here. I love silence, for example. I love to ask a question and then just sit there and see how you create discomfort in a respectful way, and watch how this person handles discomfort, but not to be mean, but to see how do they handle discomfort and how are they going to respond, and how do you reset and you know, get focused again. So that's just one idea. But
no, I actually love that because it's almost like sales, right? The first person to talk loses the conversation, right? So if you pitch something, say, hey, this is my price, and then you let the silence happen, but then you're first one to talk, you're like backing off of that level of confidence.
Yeah.
Right. So when it comes to this conversation, it's the same thing. I actually love doing that in interviews. It's like I'll read the resume, but it's also like, what's the character behind the person?
Yeah.
So not asking those same scenario based conversations or questions. It's like, hey, tell me about and you just sit there and let them squirm.
Yeah.
And it's like watching what they come up with. And it's like a great telltale sign of are they BSing you? Are they telling the truth? Or are they actually going to tell a story behind this type of experience that they've had?
Well, and the reason you do that is you want to build a team that is consistent with how you think and your values. One thing that's important to me and I believe in is honest communication. And if you're building a leadership team, and a leadership team can be between 3 and 5 or 6 people. I mean, even if you're a huge firm, you know, a leadership team, once it gets more than 6, is a little unwieldy. But you know, small firm, at least 3, you know, part of a leadership team. You want diversity of thought, at least in my opinion, right? So you want diversity of thought. You want to be able to challenge each other. It has to be safe space to challenge each other. So in your interviews, you know, I want people to be willing to be vulnerable, be willing to share information, be willing to challenge, be willing to say, I'm wrong. But you get a sense, like, you know, egos get in the way. And I've got a great podcast episode. He doesn't mind me saying it. You know, Chuck Wolf, it was built one of the largest retail camera franchises in the United States. And he'll admit it, his ego got in the way. And the industry changed. We can get into it. They went bankrupt. It hurt, right? And in hindsight, he said he could have avoided it, right? So, you know, ego often creates conflict. Ego creates unnecessary distraction. So my interviews, you know, again, just my personal style, I want to be able to uncover those things in an interview. I'd rather have honest, candid communication, even if it's uncomfortable, than you know, selling, ego. You know, everybody's selling, and if you're on the resume, people are selling. They're selling themselves, and that's a false interview.
Yep. So you're talking about ego, and I think this is a great pivot point. In the military, do we have ego? As my better half back there, so much. Yeah. And Army, I deployed with the Green Berets. I did the top tier of what the military can do. The military, I said it. The military. I said the military can do. But I deployed on a very high level. So coming back and transitioning to the civilian world, ego is a real thing because I've already been at the top tier. And I think there's a lot of folks that, as we transition on the military side, it's almost that level. I hate saying entitlement, but it's almost entitlement of I've already operated at this level.
Oh, yeah.
And you hear it from the senior officers, the senior enlisted that have like, well, I've commanded 30,000 troops or whatever obscene number that multi-star admirals command.
Yeah.
Had to throw one shot at him. By the way, Admiral Bob Wright, if y'all don't know him, smile and wave, sir. He hates being pointed out, but I love it. But it's a level of entitlement where, hey, I've operated at this level. I should be able to transition into the civilian world at this level. But if you think about it, could a civilian transfer over into being a one-star general? Probably not, because they don't have 30 years of experience. Right. Can you talk to us a little bit about taking a bite out of that ego, taking that step back in humility and be like, this is where maybe you belong in this chain of events?
Well, you mean, in other words, how do you encourage people to silence the ego, right?
Right.
It's hard because you're right. People do feel entitled and legitimately so. And by the way, recognition and celebration of achievement is a powerful force in business, just like it is in the military, right? If your team or someone individually achieves something great, celebrate it. Pump up the ego, right? But at the same time, if ego is warping how you make decisions, it needs to be broken down. Absolutely. And I see it with our leadership team over the last 3 years that we've gone through really tough times. And by the way, our clients didn't really feel it. That's what I love about it, right? So whatever internal turmoil we're managing, and that, and we're getting through it now. So kudos to the leadership team for responding, because it had to be honest communication. If it was ego and, somebody lost a client and they were like defensive about it, we're not going to get to the root cause of the problem. So, how do you break it down? You just have to constantly, just focus on the problem, focus on the business problem and not the personal side of stuff. Yeah. And if the personal side of stuff's getting in the way, just keep pointing it to the business problem. That's how I've been able to do it. And it does work because our 6-person leadership team has very different personalities, and left to their own, they'll do conflict. So right, we focus on the business problem, and it's amazing. After I built the leadership team about 3 years ago, and about 4 months into it, we started getting that cadence of trust. Took about 4 months of trust. Believe it's okay to admit you're wrong. No one's going to like penalize you for it. And now if you make a mistake 2 or 3 times, you might get penalized, and we all know that and start to expect it. Yep. But if you're in a tough situation and you've got to make decisions, half of them are going to be wrong. You fix it, you recognize it, pivot quickly, and move on. It's okay to be wrong as you're moving toward a goal to fix it. So that's my answer to get away. Just get ego off the table. If you can't, and by the way, I hired a chief of sales about 2.5 years ago. About 3 months into it, my team was like, this is not a good fit. And he had an ego, and he was not making decisions consistent with the team. I never saw it because he's treating me fine, right? But he is just rude to everybody else on the team. So 3 months into it, they're like, this guy needs to go. And it took me about 6 to 9 months to catch up. But I finally did. So you do have to sometimes remove people who are not fitting the values and the culture you're trying to build.
And it's a piece I love highlighting on the veteran side. How many of us have egos that have gotten in the way in that transition? Nobody.
Wow,
one
guy.
guy.
All right.
One guy, one girl.
Thank you. Stay vulnerable.
Right?
Thank you. Well done.
Yeah. So it's an interesting piece, even having the objectivity to take a step back and be like, okay, that was my ego or my aspect of expectation, maybe. Yeah. And maybe expectation is a better word than ego. But it transitions really well into one of your episodes talking about like the 3 lessons of entrepreneurship or the failure points of entrepreneurship. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Can you delve into that? Because I think in the military space, as we transition, especially in entrepreneurship, we just expect everything to be so great because there's like a blank check in the Army. We just get to buy and do whatever we want. And there's an endless supply chain because everybody supports the infantry, right? Army joke? No. Okay. All right. One laugh over here. One laugh. All right.
You need like one of those cue cards.
I do. Right. That's why I said y'all need to drink before I started because my jokes are terrible.
Yeah.
But there's that endless line of access to anything you want in the military. So it's almost like that level of expectation and ego comes into entrepreneurship of like, I can make this work because everything else has worked the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Can you talk about those pitfalls that you've seen entrepreneurs make?
Absolutely. Happy to do that. Before we get to there, there's one other dimension of ego, which is so interesting as you grow a business, and that's loyalty. Loyalty is a powerful concept in business, and we'll get to the 3 mistakes, but we talk about ego. Loyalty is a double-edged sword too. You want loyal teammates. You want, building loyalty is so important. But if you are successfully growing your business, you do outgrow talent, including yourself. And loyalty can make you stay too long with a person where the job has outgrown their skills.
Or vice versa. Your loyalty to the company could have you, or to the military. Right, I've seen that.
Yeah.
You're loyal to because it's the right thing, and law enforcement is the same way.
Yeah.
Right, you outgrow a department or a company, but you stay because you're loyal, and it's almost like that perverse sense of loyalty. Right, loyal for the wrong reasons, and not thinking of.
And sometimes, if you're loyal to somebody and the job's outgrown them, and I see this all the time with, like, on the financial side. At $1 million, you have your I won't even call them a bookkeeper, but just somebody who can kind of help you do your payables. If you grow to 5 million, you have outgrown your bookkeeper, right? You need to start moving to more of a controller, somebody who can handle budgets, handle accounting. And if you get to 10 million, you're really starting to need a CFO. And it's unfair to ask somebody who you've been very loyal to, who had a skill set at a certain level, if they're not keeping up. It's unfair. And most of the time they're stressed out and freaked out anyway. So I'll just point out that ego and loyalty are such important elements in creating a culture around a business, and you want to be very aware about both. It's interesting. So we've done a lot of study about this, and that's one of the things I built a podcast about, and I'm starting to write a book about it. There are 3 basic mistakes entrepreneurs make about when I'll say their personal wealth, right? Because entrepreneurship is about 2 things. Your passion about building something meaningful, but also usually, creating your own wealth, right? So, if I interview each of you as business owners, what mistakes have you made? There are all kinds of mistakes, right? And we can go into various mistakes you do. But when you boil it down and strip it out, there's basically 3 key things that entrepreneurs often make 3 basic mistakes that keeps them being successful. The first one is, and this surprises people, not planning your exit. If you're starting your business, some people are like, I'm in survival mode. Exit is the last thing I'm thinking about. I'm just trying to get this thing off the ground.
Got to pay the bills, right?
You got to, well, now you got to just prove this concept works, right? Hopefully the bills come later. And that's true, right? So, certainly in the first year or 2, have a vague idea of your exit. But at some point, relatively soon, I coach entrepreneurs. Think about how you are going to get out of this business, because you will get out, whether you want it or not, right? Something will happen where you have an exit. So define that exit for 2 reasons. One, it gives you something to shoot for in terms of business processes. But second, in terms of your own wealth number. So exit is important, and we spend a little bit more time about it. But I find if people don't think about exit, they drift, and they basically assume, if I keep working hard, value will be created. But then something happens. The value never gets tangibly created. They haven't defined what their exit is. And when they actually want to, and we were talking earlier about this, when they want to get out of the business, they can't. So thinking through your exit is important when you think about that. The second mistake people often make is not having liquidity to help them navigate through disruptions. And so what do I mean by liquidity? I'm not talking about just cash. I'm talking about a diversified financial picture away from your business. So if you're a Hollywood entrepreneur and you can hunker down in your parents' basement and you've got no obligations and you can plan for your successful IPO and it works, you have nailed it. But for most business owners and entrepreneurs, it does not work that way.
I was about to say, do you know somebody that can adopt me?
I do know a couple people like that.
I will happily be adopted into that family.
Me too. No, I do know some people like that, but it doesn't usually happen that way. 99% of people. So 99.9. And so what that means is, they're starting a business, but they either, they have other obligations, right? So, have a family or funding their own, education or things that are important to them. They have financial obligations, right? They're living their life. And if you have everything in your business and you're not starting to diversify away from it a little bit, and so that could be a 401k, it could be a taxable account, it could be, It could be a private investment, but liquidity is where I'm getting at. Liquidity gives you options when something happens in your business, like I experienced when our two co-founders split and 15% of our revenues went away. That went straight to the bottom line. I'm raising 3 boys, with my wife, and our income got cut in half. And Buckhead's expensive, so nobody's crying for it, right? I'm not crying, but what I'm saying is, didn't see that coming, right? And you have major adjustments to make. Liquidity, it will keep you in the game. And actually, liquidity also means that if you do need to sell your business, but you get terms that you don't like, you don't have to take it. It's the saddest thing in the world to see people have to sell their business because they have to. It meant that all their hopes and dreams, everything they're invested in to build it, didn't happen. And now they're having to sell it, usually at a discount to what fair value would be. And somebody, it's a cold, hard market. They get taken advantage of and they have to sell, and they don't build that nest egg they wanted. So that's the second.
So before you go on to the third, I want to translate this slightly. And this is something I see in the veteran space all the time, myself included. A lot of what you're talking about is that diversification of what that expected track is.
Yes.
In the military, a lot of what we focus on with ATLVets and vet ops, especially, we had a colonel that we were helping in Tampa, and 30-year Army colonel, great retirement setup, did everything right up until the day that he was transitioning into the civilian life, right? He did all the things the Army recommended, got the retirement plan in order, got his benefits in order, everything perfect. And then that day inevitably comes, right?
Yeah.
For me, it was a medical retirement. I was kicked out. So many veterans have been kicked out of the military, right?
Yeah.
Medically retired, or for whatever reason, you can't continue that service. So it turned into somebody with that caliber of a colonel, 30 years of experience, that next year of his life, he just floundered, right? Because he didn't have that exit strategy. So the translation here, if you're not necessarily in the entrepreneurship and you're not thinking that realm, we've seen it as veterans where we plan for that day of retirement to what they tell us to plan for, but we don't do anything else. We don't diversify. We don't necessarily look at other investments. We don't look at other aspects of what's outside of military retirement. The VA pays me decently, the Army pays me decently, but that's not enough to keep me going, because once we have that paycheck from the VA, that's great. It might pay some bills, but like, I'm bored, I'm lonely, I'm not reignited.
Yeah.
Right. I don't have a I don't have a purpose. I don't have a passion. I don't have a reason to wake up tomorrow. I almost became that statistic.
Yeah.
Right. 22 a day. We've all heard that. Right. Because we have no reason to wake up tomorrow because we just lost that uniform. In entrepreneurship, it happens. Right. That exit isn't planned for. In life, it happens. Whether you're an employee, whether you're a veteran, whether you're an entrepreneur, that advice, I think, is such a great nugget of plan for that next step, even if you don't know what that next step may be.
Well, no, it's so true, because like I said, you will exit your business whether you like it or not. So you might as well do it on your terms. And that means a couple of things. It means who takes over when you're gone. It does. A lot of people, when they hear exit, think I mean sell. That's not necessarily true. You can keep your stake in the business, but at some point, either you're too old to work on it, or you're not skilled, because go back to that loyalty theme, you've grown beyond your skills, what's best for the business. Other people need to take over for you. And that's what a leadership team will do, right? You're starting to fill in. So going back to your leadership team question, know what your own strengths are, and then build a leadership team that covers your weaknesses, right? And lets you focus on 80% of your time on what you're great at and it's going to move the business forward. And your leadership team does other things excellent, different than you. So that is building independence.
And I think that also applies, it translates really well into the personal life. Right. And I think this is something that I didn't really think about as I transitioned as a twice divorced guy because of the military, right? And my own mindset that couldn't translate. So I alienated my personal leadership team, right? My family, my friends, my support system. I think that translates really well on both sides, because at the end of the day, as veterans, we push everybody away. We don't want to hear insights. We don't want to hear mentorship. We don't want anybody's help. And that includes business and personal, because we just continue the mission, right? So I think a lot of what you're saying does have that dual responsibility of your personal life and your professional life because it impacts both directions.
It does. And I see entrepreneurs do the same thing you
Yep.
described for veterans, right? They're all about the business. They don't understand if somebody isn't all in about the business, they don't understand why. They don't take advice very well. And they ignore those relationships in their personal lives that at the end of the day is so important. And they ignore them, and they wake up when they're 40 or 45 and they're like, wow, my business might be successful, but I'm not.
Yep.
And or at least I'm not fulfilled, right? This isn't what I thought it was.
On paper, I'm successful.
On paper, some of them
right?
are. Yeah.
And at 32, I had an 8-figure offer for an exit.
Yeah.
And I was still active duty military. I
Yeah.
had everything on paper, massively successful.
Yeah.
Absolutely miserable because my time in uniform is coming to an end.
Yeah.
Right. And that was that same time I almost became a statistic.
Yeah.
So it's like on paper, you could see a lot of amazing things. But on the other hand, like if your house isn't in order, and we forget that, hence the 2 divorces, right? I'm focused on the mission. I'm focused on what we're doing, what we're accomplishing. Thankfully, I have a better 3/4 these days that yanks that leash a couple times and tells me, hey, get your head on right. We got date night on Friday.
Well, what you're talking about is balance, and that gets to a little bit of an angle on the third mistake entrepreneurs make, and that is independence from the business. Independence means financial independence, but it also means balance and personal independence, because it's not healthy.
Yep.
For most people to be just so wedded to the business. And like, for example, last summer, an entrepreneur came to me and he said, when I started this business, it was exciting and I loved it, but I am hijacked by my business, right? I'm no longer in control, even though I'm the CEO. Financially, it's gotten beyond what I can do. My partner and I are at odds. And, you know, we've got European operations that are, I can't even figure out what's going on. And I'm worried it's fraud. He's like, I am hijacked by my business. And he was miserable, right? Fortunately, he knew enough to like keep that separate so that his family was staying intact. But, you know, it's, yeah, when you get hijacked, you can lose a lot of perspective, a lot of balance.
Yep.
Yeah.
So number 3, I hijacked number 2.
Yeah. So,
number 3.
All right. So to recap then, so exit is all about outcomes, right? How do you want to think about your outcomes? Number 2 was liquidity. That's all about options. The more liquidity you have, the more options you have. So if you're going to start a business, right? Let's say you're coming out of the military or you're coming out of a corporate job, you want to start a business. You want to invest in the business, and you're going to have to, but be careful about putting everything you have in it, right? You've built up a little bit of a nest egg, hopefully, or if you fortunately have. Keep some of that. That diversification is important because it will give you options. Then number 3 is that independence, and that's about risk. First one's about outcomes, second one's about options, third one's about risk. If you are all in on your business, personally and financially, and you don't understand the risks of the business, over the next 10 years, something's going to happen and it's going to expose that risk. It's going to be very painful. And there's a good chance it will get you off plan. So independence means stepping back, understanding what those risks are that could threaten your independence, and making sure that you can manage them so that you aren't taken down if your business, and it's not like your business is going to explode necessarily, but you know, like there are disruptions in the journey. And I always, from the wealth advisory standpoint, always like to see, I want to see your business succeed, but I want to see you generate wealth anyway. It's not only tied to the success of the business. And a lot of people find that surprising. They're like, I'm an entrepreneur. I want my business to be successful. So do I. But you're investing in it. It's your livelihood. Let's make you a success anyway at a basic level. And it's all about balance. And then, but man, if you can do lights out on your business and get upside to that, let's go for it. But now you start having awareness and making decisions appropriately.
But how dare you tell me it's not just about the U.S. Army, and that's all I have to focus on? And that's kind of a funny piece, right? We're taught there's this box right here. Don't you dare step outside of that box. This is how we expect you to look, act, do, and then not diversify, right? It's almost like a piece that you're pigeonholed into this space. I think who's in that corporate world these days struggling with that, right? Do y'all feel that? Where like you're pigeonholed, here's what you're supposed to do. So in order to get promoted, you have to leave the company to move up. Right. I feel like there's that piece as well. So when you're talking about that aspect, how do you define that in a, I don't think selfish is a bad word, right? And you almost have to be selfish in this capacity. Loyalty is great to the organization, the mission, the people that are pushing you to be better. But there's a piece of like selfishness. You have to kind of be like, okay, hang on, I got to worry about myself, my family. Where am I going to go in that direction?
Yeah.
How do you kind of touch on that piece for
Well,
us to put it in our
well,
minds?
It is balance. And I try to get our team to understand that too, because if you have balance, you perform better over the long term. I don't mind asking anybody to give it all and give it up and make personal sacrifices for the short term, right? There are times when you have to do it for the short term. In the military, if you got a mission and a task, you got to be all in, frankly.
Yep.
But you can't do that 12 months a year, right? Or well, 3 years in a row.
There you go. There you go. I was going to say 12 months, you kind of
You
have
might get an
to.
assignment that long.
Yeah.
But I can say it in the corporate world. I mean, you can't do it for 12 months a year because we talk culture is kind of a buzzword, burnout is a buzzword, but I'm seeing more CEOs confidentially tell me I can't take it anymore. I don't know if it's an echo from the pandemic. People have been isolated, more pressure. There are about probably 10 or 20 different things that are forcing that. But the world is more isolated today. The world is more lonely today. The world is more just burned out today. So, and that means an underperforming team. But it means unhealthy people and it means unhealthy communities. So, I hope it doesn't sound trite, but balance is important. You got to have it. And I ask our team to make sure they get it. And I'll force them to it. I'll say, tell me your priorities. I did it with our operations manager last week. What are your priorities? Where are you falling off? Well, you got to hit those things, but make sure, you're not working this weekend for it.
So I have one more question for Cannon, and then I love going to Q&A and having y'all have any questions that y'all might ask. Something that I wish I had learned early in my days of entrepreneurship, and I've started my first business about 7 years ago now. So it's been that up and down and topsy-turvy. I've seen a lot. One thing I wish I'd recognized in my early days is when you have an opportunity to talk to a multi seven-figure CEO, right? Pushing into that 8-figure realm.
Yeah.
I wish somebody had said, hey, bend his ear on anything you can think of. I was very fortunate. One of my early mentors was Michael Coles, who founded the Great American Cookie Company. And he didn't found it, but he was CEO of Caribou. And he exited for 9 figures in the 90s. He was one of my early mentors, has a huge passion for veterans. I bend his ear all the time. I still text him, hey man, I'm about to screw this up. What do you recommend? And that's something I wish I learned earlier is like the ask. In the military space, we don't ask. We don't ask for help. We don't ask for advice. We don't ask for anything. Again, part of that ego. So I want to walk the room, hand the mic off. Anybody that might have a question for Cannon. My final question for you, there's a piece of everything we do in the military, everything we do in entrepreneurship. You mentioned it earlier. There's that legacy piece. You want to create something that works, right? Everything I've asked every guest on my podcast, what is that legacy you want to leave with everything you're putting into the world?
You mean me personally?
You personally?
Well, I mean, of course, you want to take care of your family. I want to do 2 things. So we've developed a system around financial independence. I call it the 3 R's. We can get into it. But I would love to help entrepreneurs improve their odds of success so they're fulfilled and the economy is better, right? I mean, because small businesses are such an important part of economic growth, particularly because the last decade is more about large businesses. Historically, small businesses have been the engine of the economy. I think over the last 10 years, and I've asked people at the Federal Reserve, all kinds of data, can we validate it? But, the Amazons of the world, the Googles of the world have kind of taken over and stifled innovation a little bit. I would love small business to regain its footing there because it does create jobs. It does create innovation. It is the heart and soul of what we do as a country. So, I would love my legacy to have done a small part to create people to have successful plans to create wealth in their businesses and create successful businesses for the economy. That's what I love to do business-wise.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. So before we give too much of a round of applause, because you're already getting cheered on, we can't let you get too much ego about being awesome.
Trust me, I got no ego.
I do want to work the room a little bit. Mind y'all, I do have to say everything's being recorded. So if you say something silly, I will make it viral on TikTok. So
You'll do
be
it.
mindful as I'm walking towards Ian because he raised his hand. So please go ahead. What's your question for Kenan?
Kenan, have you started for your clients for the business?
ESOP, we do have clients who use ESOPs. That is a pretty strong specialty, and we don't have an expertise in that. So a lot of what we do actually is partner with others who have that expertise. What's that? Yeah. Oh, good. All right. Well, let's talk. Because yeah, that's a specialty, and it can work in magic ways, but you do have to know what you're doing on it. Yeah. So I like, for us, we put together the frameworks. We in a way, I'm becoming more of a coach for entrepreneurs, an accountability coach. To say, all right, so here's where you want to be 5 years from now. We meet every quarter. We're like, okay, are you doing those things you want to do? But in that, we uncover how do you create liquidity, right? Cash balance plans, 401k, ESOPs, if you're going to have your employees buy you out. And there, yeah, I'd rather farm that expertise externally. So let's talk.
Explain what it is.
Well, why don't you explain it? Yeah.
So an ESOP is an employee stock option plan, which essentially is the company, the employees of the company buy into the company.
So it's a way to allow employees to buy out the founders or the owners of the company and generate and transfer it to the next generation.
Create a liquidity event.
Great liquidity event for the founder. So
And
it's by definition, yeah.
It's a golden ticket. So on the employee side, it's one of those, if you want me to work for you, give me some of the company, and I'm really going to bust my butt for you and be as invested as a CEO is, because it is also part of my company. And golden ticket's one of those things I've heard more recent of, like, as an employee, that's what I'm looking for. I want somebody that as a CEO is willing to give me more skin in the
By the
game.
way, Publix is the largest ESOP in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love Publix. I see another hand over here, and I'm really
Good question.
nervous about this one.
Yeah.
I'm really nervous about this one, Cannon. I apologize.
What are your advice to entrepreneurs?
So two things. So one, if you're getting your business off the ground, it's probably going to be hard to get residual income to funnel money that way. So the first 3 to 5 years is usually about getting your business off the ground. But that said, all right, so diversification is the theme, right? Alternative, having liquidity elsewhere outside of the business. So diversified revenue streams are important. If you've got your business off the ground, and it's a choice, right? If you want to grow your business really fast, there are a lot of different things to do, right? You might need third-party capital. You might be putting some of your own capital in, and that becomes your mission. But if you've got a good lifestyle business, or you've got a good business that's running that doesn't need extra capital from you, a second or third income stream can be huge, particularly if it moves differently than the rhythm of the first business you're doing, because that's the definition of a diversified revenue stream. Now you can do it in investing, where you get dividends and distributions, but you can also put it into another business. You just have to manage that illiquidity, right? If both investments now are illiquid, and you've got to, and you can't necessarily control the distributions from it, you just have to be very aware of that. But if your second or third stream is particularly pretty liquid, like rental properties, right? Those are great. Yeah. So I recommend it in balance with but this is why planning your exit in that first business is so important, because if your exit requires, you're really shooting for the moon, that's going to take capital. So, you just got to get that balance. That's all.
As it relates to exit strategy, I think that we all should always be aware that there's going to be changes, and we should always prepare for the future. So you should always prepare for an exit.
Yeah, no, you're right. And this gets to the fact that, people are like, and I get it, as the CIO of our firm, people are like, can you predict what the markets are going to do? Where's stocks going to be, at the end of the year? Our interest rates, are we going to get 5% over on the 10-year treasury now? And I love talking about those things. But the short and long answer is, you can't predict, right? I mean, there's who's the economist who predicted, economists are famous for predicting 9 of the last 4 recessions. So, I mean, there's always, and people expecting the Federal Reserve to cut rates, right? And you remember for the last 6 months. Look at a chart in the options market, how wrong they've been. And these are the smartest people in the world. So you can't predict. So the question is, and going back to exit strategy, you can't predict what's going to happen, but you do know there's going to be disruption. You just don't know when. And you've got to have, that's why liquidity in some form, I'm not talking big liquidity, but some form to give you that cushion to manage through that, because it's coming.
So I'm gonna make him ask a question at some point, Admiral Wright. To give a little background on him, because I love putting him on the spot, and he has some of the best questions I've ever heard asked. If y'all have followed my journey it's almost been 2 years. Admiral Wright was actually my very first speaker at this event before this was even a thing. So 2 years ago, we did a Independence Day celebration here before ATLVets, before the Veteran Club, and it was Admiral Wright that was the speaker at that. So I have one question before you, but I'm going to circle to you because I have to put you on the spot for these great questions. Oh, and go Army, say it. Go Army.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Luis. Just to kind of give a context, I am the owner of a construction firm that specializes in set-aside work for federal government. I mainly do federal government work. And going back to the question of controlling your ego, humbling your ego, lose $1 million, that will really humble you down. So,
It definitely will.
And construction is very volatile. I did 3 deployments, and when I got out, it was like, I needed like that combat environment because I just kept wanting to be overseas and just kind of being at the tip of the spear and that sort of thing. And construction really did it for me. It was a lot of risk. So, one of the things that I wish I knew and that I still need to set up because, it's volatile, is I have self-directed IRAs that I've, put in money from my construction firm as I've made money and put it in self-directed IRAs, which, I do use to reinvest in real estate and stuff like that. But in construction, there's a lot of bonding work. Everything is bonded, meaning that if you mess up, if a job doesn't get completed or you underbid a job, the surety is going to come back to your personal assets and make you pay for it anyway. So, I need to set up and, still wanting to make sure I do it right, where I have a management company. That's managing this entity that is somehow put into a trust, an unrevocable trust, where the managing company is just getting paid for getting the contracts, getting the contracts, managing the projects. But a lot of the assets, as they're made, they're put into a separate entity that it's in a irrevocable trust. So that way, if by any chance the business needs to go bankrupt because, we underbid on a job, or sometimes one of the issues that we were finding now with the increase in escalation that occurred after the war in Russia and all that stuff, was that a lot of our construction projects that we had bid at a certain price, they were on hold for a couple of months, and all costs of materials increased 40%, 30% in less than 3 months, 4 months. And I go back to the government and really humble down, use my selfless service and be like, hey, I want to get this project done. I don't want to get the lawyers involved in getting all this stuff, but I need another $1 million to get this project done. What can we do? And still fighting several projects like that, still in the debate, but now I'm in a position where, I accumulated wealth, but still working through it, and everything works out. But if I had set that process up that I mentioned earlier, I probably would be sleeping better at night. In case, the government doesn't want to give me the funds to complete these projects, then I gotta dig into my well to finish these projects.
That's right.
So, yeah, that is something that I'm sharing as a perspective. Maybe you can talk about that setup that I'm talking about, where you have a management firm who's controlling an irrevocable trust, that sort of thing, you know?
Yeah. Well, first of all, history is always a great teacher, right? And so you've learned, but it sounds like you're now doing the right thing. So the concept he's talking about is you want to separate your assets in what's called an irrevocable trust as opposed to a revocable trust. Because revocable means you can undo it and the government doesn't give you tax credit for that and protection for that. So irrevocable trust means that you are protecting yourself from the business assets. So that's important. And there are different ways to do that. I won't get into that now. And in fact, I have team members who are much more expert than I am. But you do want to protect your own assets from the business assets so that if your business gets sued or whatever, you are independent, from your business. So I'm glad you've moved into that path too. We do have many clients who do have to personally back projects and provide their own capital from it, right? So we manage the liquid wealth, and it's fine. I mean, they'll pull from their liquid wealth substantially more than they ever thought they would do because they have to finish a project because for a variety of reasons funding fell through. And that happens, right? Our job is to make sure that we've anticipated that as best as possible so that there's always that cushion for them to be able to do that and still be financially independent. But sometimes it's a tough line. There's no magic, easy answer. But anyway, thank you for sharing that story.
So from fancy CEO to fancy CEO, the Admiral Bob Wright, we're gonna have to have a question as the final question of the evening. I want to make sure we still have time to network before the Buckhead Club kicks us out. So we'll end with the Admiral, and I'm gonna make you ask something. Put him on the spot. Put the burner on for him.
And I've met Admiral Wright several times, and just so much respect. So thank you. I'll take whatever question you want to throw over here.
I don't want anybody.
All right, Bob.
Like DOT, all the same way. First of all, I want to commend both that. This is the pay it forward. This really means a lot. There's so many that don't understand that concept, and you both truly are looking at it. Because you're here tonight, we have entities that are trying to support and ensure others do benefit from it. So I commend you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can tell you what I guess the folks in the room are going to relate to this is the trust of what we had in the security uniform. I miss those days like you can't imagine, and I still. A day doesn't go by where I'm not touching base with someone that I spent time with, and it's 36 years of uniform service. Yeah, we but I gotta tell you, an observation that I have, and it does wear on me a little bit, but in private sector, they talk trust. I was a compensator for 2 big events shortly after I graduated to speak about my experiences. One with the Fenway Park, the other with the Pine Bluff. Highly compensated. I vowed I'll never do it again because everyone there was 5 o'clock. Self-identified with me. I'm like you. I said these are wealth folks, but I'm a gunslinger like you. I said I'm not a gunslinger. I'm a naval officer. We have to have a pleasure enjoyment of flying fire. And I was asked again to cover another highly compensated event. I've never done one since. I much prefer to be back with what I call, the ground truth. And that's where we are here. So I'm CEO of a company, actually the third company, small AI companies, and now I have a data science company. And the thing that just really surprises me, private sector, one of my business partners told me, the closer you are to money, the more you make. The closer you are to wealth, the more you make. And that was her marching orders, the senior executive. And I'm seeing that to be true. But I'm now developing these skill that, it's what you have to do, but doesn't make me happy. So it depends upon who I'm working with. If I'm working with a developer, data engineer, we have a certain way that we're gonna go about identifying what it is the deliverable would be and what we require. But, it's so ironic that when I'm dealing with someone looking to make a large investment in the company, I have to look at what motivates that person. And it's that closer to money and peace that I have to structure everything as to what would motivate that person in that, what I need, what they want to provide, what the best deal in the middle will be. It's not how I grew up. I can be dropped anywhere in the world. Dealt with cartels in Mexico, I've dealt with Middle East, North Africa, and I was always able to focus on what we needed as a nation, a global operating system of the free nations, the Western nations, and work towards a solution. It's very strange. I don't carry a lot of that forward. Being mediation event Tuesday will be a big one. And I see no gaps. Nothing that I can look to close, try to find what's going to be a solution for the parties involved. All right. So, you know, I miss where I was. I miss who I was with, and the world that I find myself in now that you grew up in and others. It's so unusual to see someone that will take their time, expertise, effort, and non-compensated in any way, but want to come. So, I admire it. That's the only statement that I had.
Well, thank you.
Beautiful.
Those are great comments. I mean, Bob, you inspire people to do that. Zach, you inspire people to do that. You both give forward. And talking to some of you in this room, you give forward. So that's the magic, right? And when it's done anonymously, it's the most magic. But anyway.
And I'm curious to Bob's point, in the military, it's kind of ingrained in us. From the other perspective, where do you gain that perspective to do what you're doing tonight and the insights you give and all the aspects you're putting forward? Where do you gain that, or where'd you learn that aspect from?
Well, it's a $1 million question. I think my parents always wondered why I did that too. I think it's sharing and realizing that you don't know all the answers and others have given you answers. And there's no way I would be where I am now without help of others, right? So you have to share, and it's a joy to do that. Bob, you mentioned trust, and when you look at like the Pew Research Center, anybody know the Pew does research? Trust of public institutions is the lowest I think it's ever been, right? Congress, companies, it's CEOs,
The VA.
the VA. Yeah, okay. Trust is as low as it's ever been. And
Sorry, I made it a cheap shot. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I'll let you do it.
But what's bad is we might have a representative in the room for
I
the
figured you
VA.
knew what
My
you-
bad. I didn't mean it.
You knew what you were doing.
I was kidding. I mean it with love.
So we've lost a lot of trust, and yet trust is that's what you relish, and I think we can all build that together, and it does take building that together. And I can see it even with our own leadership team. When you start knowing you can be vulnerable and trust each other and be honest and make better decisions, you're in a better place.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely love that. Let's give him a round of applause, y'all.
thank you all for coming out. I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Good job.
Of course. And we have about 20-30 minutes before they kick us out, which means a refill and more dad jokes from me, hopefully.
we'll do it.
But time for you to talk to Cannon. Before I let everybody go, I do want to highlight just a couple more things we have coming up. Oh, nice. My slideshow. I love when my slideshow works. All right. So something we're doing with Advancing the Line, you don't have to go away. I'm going to
just
like
getting out of the
rope
way.
you into these. Every week on Thursday, we host a workout over near the Battery with MVP, emerging vets and players. Two very amazing events we have, and I'm going to get her attention. Taylor, who's my better three quarters, with DT Corporate Wellness. She is sponsoring 2 events for us at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where we're doing workouts at the stadium. The first one's May 26th. The second one is June 30th. The June 30th one, we're actually getting a private tour of the stadium, thanks to Taylor. So her company's sponsoring that piece, and she's running workouts. If y'all don't know Taylor, she loves making men cry. So if anybody wants to show up and cry with me, I'll be there. The Vet Ops Workshop, like I mentioned, and then of course, the Buckhead Club Speaker Series, always the first Monday and second Tuesday. Scan the QR, look at upcoming events. Overall, we have some amazing partnerships. I love highlighting. We have some amazing people in our world, people like Canon that want to pay it forward to vets and want to support us and give us great insights. So thank y'all for being here. Give him one more round of applause. And please chit chat, get another beverage. We have about 20 minutes before Gerardo kicks us out. I see him mean mugging me over there, but he's willing to pour a double shot of whatever you want, and he'll pay for it.
Oh,
Worth a shot, worth a shot. Y'all have a good night. Thank y'all.
all right.